Let's do this. The Cult of Hockey podcast by the faithful and for the faithful. I'm David Staples of the Edmonton Journal, and I'm here today with Bruce McCurdy. Hey, Bruce.
Hey, David, how you doing today?
Good. How are you?
I'm all right, all things considered. Rainy Monday in January.
Yeah,
What
I
could
was out
possibly
driving
go
already.
wrong?
It is already a skating rink, and I got a hockey game I got to drive to tonight at 10:30. So,
Oh, wow.
frack-a-moly. It's going to get suddenly very cold. We're going to get rain all day,
I was
and
going
it's
to
going to get
dive.
suddenly very cold. It's going to be interesting out there, Bruce. Of course, Edmonton drivers are used to this by now. Like everyone's driving pretty cautiously, I notice. Like, and I'm not kidding about that. Like people are driving fairly well. So, nonetheless, it's going to be a nightmare. I'll have to leave like an hour early for the game. All right, Bruce, we're going to do a little bit of a summary today, on Ken Holland. A little bit of the trial of Ken Holland. Not really, but we will be digging into his offseason moves and discussing, debating which ones turned out, which ones didn't. We will also let's just do a quick summary of the first 21 games and the last 14. So just quickly, I'll give you some of the highlights in terms of in the first 21 games, the Oilers had 16 wins and 5 losses. They scored 3.8 goals per game, and they gave up 2.9 goals per game. That's a plus 0.9 per game goals differential, almost a goal a game goals differential. In the last 14 games, they have won 2, they've lost 12. Bruce, they've scored 2.5 goals per game and given up 4. That's a minus 1.5 per game goals differential. So they've gone from essentially plus 1 goals per game in the first 21 games to minus 1.5. That is remarkable. It really is remarkable. And, the two different teams narrative has got some backing. So what the heck has gone wrong? And when we dig in, we do all this work into grade A shots, trying to get a idea of the Oilers' process in each game. Are they manufacturing grade A shots? Are they giving up grade A shots against? And it's not nearly so dramatic, the change in the team, when you look at them through that lens. So in the first 21 games, the Oilers created 14 grade A shots a game, and they gave up 12, a little bit more than 12. In the last 14 games, they've created 13 grade A shots per game, and they've given up 12. So they're giving up the same number of grade A shots per game. They're creating 1 less grade A shot per game, and that's on the power play. So that's a significant drop in power play effectiveness. So there is that. But other than that, they're not giving up more grade A shots per game. So Bruce, I'm going to say the two factors which have created this massive swing in the Oilers is a less effective, less productive power play and a huge swing in goaltending, where they were getting far more effective goaltending before, and their goaltending is absolutely cratered in the last 14 games. That's my read on it. Any thoughts?
Well, I think you can extend special teams. Both special teams have cratered in the last 14 games. In the first 21, the Oilers scored 23 power play goals and allowed 8 power play goals against. And they even scored 3 shorthanded goals in that time. And now in the last 14 games, they've scored 7. So they've basically gone from scoring 1 a game to half a game, and they've allowed 14. So they've gone from basically allowing a third of a power play goal a game to 1 full power play goal per game. And so the big advantage that they had from the great special teams has not just disappeared, but it's actually gone very much into the negative side of things. And it's a lot of games you could point to. Well, early in the season, they would have won that game with a power play goal, and this time they lost it because they gave up a power play goal.
I would say that the power play chances, and we don't track this as much. We don't track this. they're giving up slightly more shorthanded chances now. The Oilers are on the penalty kill.
Mm-hmm.
2.9 in the last 14 games as opposed to 2.5 per game in the first 21. So it's, that's a significant increase, I guess, in the number of grade A shots they're giving up. We don't track though, we track grade A shots, which tend to go in about 25% plus percent of the time. But I think that the magnitude of the likelihood of those shots going in has increased significantly. They're giving up the 5 alarm chance more often, I'm going to suggest, in the last 14 games, plus the goaltending. But I think on the not at even strength, their defense hasn't been shredded. But I think the PK is just giving up not only grade A shots, but grade AAA shots, or the 5 alarm shots as I call them, and they're doing that more often. Case in point was the winning goal against Ottawa, where it was the old cross seam shot. The Oilers, when the PK was bad, when a PK is bad, you're giving up cross seam passes, and we're seeing that more. And we saw that on the winning goal against Ottawa. That's the kind of chance you give up. So they're not protecting the middle of the ice. On that play, and I always wonder about this, having smaller players on the penalty kill. It went through Ryan and Sevier, the cross seam pass, and they're both smaller players. They're not I always wonder why don't you have Jesse Puljujärvi on the penalty kill? The 6 foot whatever, 6'4", 6'5" guy instead of the 5'10" guy. Isn't he going to have that extra foot of reach to stop the cross seam pass? And that's just a general thought in general. I mean, you could do that at any time of the year, but I always think, how about somebody like Puljujärvi's fast, he's big, he's not a stupid defensive player. I think he's got good defensive acumen. So anyway, that's just a little bit of a pet peeve of mine.
Mm-hmm.
Wondering about that question. All right, Kat, get down.
Yeah, they got both their goals, Ottawa, power play goals, from a guy that was left, the same guy, the Ottawa's leading goal scorer, a good Newfoundland boy, Josh Norris, who was left alone in the high slot on both. And the Oilers didn't either prevent the pass nor get in the shooting lane, nor did they get a save. And, I didn't think either of Norris's shots was, unstoppable by any means. I think Skinner on the winner, he came across expecting a quick shot and he lost his post a little bit. Like he went a little bit too far and he left the far side open and Norris hit the far side. But it's, the other thing about the penalty killing is that the Oilers have a pretty strong record of getting a lot of saves on the penalty kill. They've been over 900 the last 2 years on the penalty kill, which is very, very good. And they started out this year the same way, and now all of a sudden it's like 3 power play shots, 2 goals for the other team, like Saturday night. That isn't going to get it done.
My idea about having taller, rangier players on the PK, of course, if you want to counter that, Cassian was on the PK, big, tall, rangy guy, and he was absolutely atrocious because he had such terrible defensive reads and wouldn't block shots. So, it's not necessarily the case. No, smaller players can be excellent penalty killers. So, and taller players can be awful penalty killers. But I just have a feeling Jesse Puljujärvi would be a fantastic penalty killer. And I felt that for some time now. I'd like to see that given a try. Hey, they put Nurse and Cece together, something I lost a couple of weeks ago. So I'm sure they don't pay attention here, but nonetheless, it's nice to see when something that I've wanted to see has happened. And I think Nurse and Cece will work out, if I'm completely honest. Okay, Bruce, let's just move on quickly here to the Holland stuff. Okay. We're going to go through the list of acquisitions, and let's just give a thumbs up or a thumbs down to each guy in terms of has this worked out? That'll be the question. Has this worked out for the Oilers? Okay, Derek Ryan, Bruce. We're going to start with the centers. Derek Ryan was brought in on a 1-year contract. I think it's like a slightly above
2-year contract.
2-year contract. Yeah, okay. 1.2 million.
1.25.
I'll just call it cap friendly. Bruce, thumbs up, thumbs down, and why?
Yeah, well, I got to give the thumbs down so far. And I think the why is that he's 35 years old, David. And for all that, this was an extraordinary player who kept, to my eye, improving right into his 30s in terms of still getting better, measurably better. Like not, often you see players improving specific skills as they go on face-offs or some things, but I think Brian's overall game was still getting better, even into, through his time in Carolina and even into his time in Calgary. And of course, he was a very late arrival as it was. Um, but whether he's lost a step or he's, he just, I mean, his goals for on ice goals for +6 -19 the last time I checked, and that's beyond brutal. And his acumen on the penalty kill. Well, it was he who was getting burned on both of the Ottawa goals on Saturday night, and uh, you know, so where's the upside on this player? Uh, the good news is his contract is not it's not outrageous, but it is a 2-year deal, meaning Holland's committed next year to him as a 35 plus in terms of the contract doesn't get judged that way because he signed it when he's 34, but he will be that old. And where, it just doesn't strike me as being a very good bet going forward. And I like the player. I've liked him for a long time, but I think we're getting the very end of the line of that player. It's like when we got Kyle Brodziak back, hey, he had a terrific career, but guess what? Now he's 33 or 34 or whatever he was, and it didn't end well, but it ended in Edmonton.
Yeah. All right, Bruce, I'm going to give him the thumbs up.
Okay. Yeah.
This deal. Yeah, and
Okay.
it's not really that, you know, it's more like a thumbs kind of in the middle here.
Okay.
Um, so I like his play at even strength, and I think he's trending better. I think he's starting to play better. I think the main issue is he's been asked to do too much. He should be a fourth line center at this point.
Mm-hmm.
He's
Well, he
not a
mostly
third line
is.
center. So there's a usage issue, which isn't his fault. It's not his fault that Holland didn't solve the problem at third line center, and I don't think Ryan McLeod, honestly, right now is the answer. So um, Ryan has struggled a bit because he's been asked to do too much. I think he's been okay on the PK, notwithstanding that last game when he was at fault on 2 goals against. Um, I think I'm not sure what is his face-offs. I think he's done okay in the face-off circle. Bruce, I just like him at even strength in a limited role. I think he's a better player, much better player than Brodziak at a similar. Brodziak was just way too slow. Ryan can still get around the ice. He generally makes good decisions. He's he he gives a little bit more than he gives up. He went through a slump for about 2 or 3 weeks at even strength, but other than like he started off strong, he was then weak for a while, and he's been good at even strength for the last month. The main reason though is like I don't like the 2 years. I wish it was 1 year, but with a contract like that, you can bury it in the minors at little cost. When you're making bets on players, you can sign a number of players, 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or whatever. If you're prepared to pay them in the minors their for full salary, there's no skin, no skin off your teeth taking a bet on this kind of player. And I just wish, in fact, they'd sign a couple more just like him, maybe for a little bit less. So if you sent him down, there'd be no penalty at all. So because of that, because there's such little downside in such a signing, and there has been some positive aspects of this player's play, I'm okay with this signing and this kind of signing, generally speaking. I don't have a problem with it. And again, I just wish if they brought in one more guy like this, like that might have even been a better idea. So that's my take on it from the GM's chair. That's how I see this.
Well, I do agree that he got after a brief hot start, he was getting crushed in the 3C role. But as I've seen it, he's played quite a bit more in 4C in recent
Yes.
times. According to Puck IQ, who rate quality of competition, Ryan has seen less elite competition than any of the other listed centers on the Oilers. Now, granted, it's pretty close with guys like Shore and Turris, who's listed as a center, but significantly less than Ryan Mcleod or even Sevier. And of course, the big guys are way above that because the other team matches their strongest players against Edmonton's strongest. That's sort of common around the league, power v power. But it's not like Ryan is being given a heavy load of being asked to check top players on the other team. They're just getting beat, and it's. I get the signing is defensible. Let's put it that way. The results have not been good, so that's where my downward pointing thumb is coming through 35 games.
Okay. I'm just trying to find his overall face-off percentage. These NHL stats are very okay. I think he's doing okay on the dot as far as I can see here. I'm going to move to this other one, face-off wins and losses. Get stats.
Yeah. Oh yeah, he's 55% on the dot. And so pretty good overall. I'd like to see a breakdown of how that is on the defensive zone and the penalty kill. But of course, those are face-offs that when you do lose them, they tend to be in the spotlight quickly. One other assist stat from Derek Ryan, though, 30 games played, center, 0 assists.
Yeah, he's not much of an offensive player.
And he was.
Yeah, he was. Yeah, you're right. Like this is the downside of the signing is you waited a little long here. Maybe, if you're going to make a bet, like when you're making these kind of bets on these kind of players, go for the guy who's 28, 29, 30, as opposed to the guy who's 33, 34, 35. Because how often, Brodziak, Belanger, how often has this bit the Oilers hard? So there's that. So, my positive signal is not a strong positive. It's like, I'm okay with it. I don't think it was a big mistake. All right. Should we do Ryan Mcleod? He's a newcomer to the team, but he wasn't a new acquisition by Holland. But Holland essentially, with his lack of activity, gave the job to Mcleod. So let's do Mcleod and Bruce. I'm going to give Mcleod's performance a thumbs down.
Mm-hmm.
He's at even strength. He's not been a strong player. He's had his troubles in the defensive end. I see the potential there still, but he's going through a real learning phase, and he's part of the problem on the Oilers right now. He's part of he's just not really getting it done. Like last against Ottawa, for instance, that line of Puljujarvi and Hyman, both Puljujarvi and Hyman were constantly winning, protecting pucks. Then it would go to Mcleod, and I noticed a number of times there'd be a turnover. He's just not there yet. And I think he will be there. I think he's working towards it, but it's not there now. He's not a third line center. He's not a second line center. He should be on the wing probably in the NHL, on a fourth line role, and working his way up to the third line center position. And I think like if this is still a big hole on the team, they've asked him to fill it. It's too much, and he's struggling. That's how I see it.
Yeah, well, I'm going to give him a thumbs up just so we can have a nice debate. And I'm going to give that in the context of where he is in his career, which is still in his entry-level contract. And he came, as many of the younger guys do just now, through a bit of a scrambled route that took him to Europe for part of last year after a pretty rough first year in the AHL. And he came back last year and he was good in the AHL. They called him up for the last 10 games. They used him for all 4 playoff games as well. So he's not new to the team, but he's still pretty new. But this year, I mean, his box scars, 23 games played, 4 goals, 2 assists, 6 points, +1, which stands out on this team at this particular time. Like he's not getting crushed, is what plus minus sort of tells you in a very, very sort of basic level. Is the guy getting crushed? Is he really outscoring the other team, or is he in the mushy middle? Well, Ryan Mcleod is there. playing with a variety of line mates, as you say. Since Nuge got out, he's stepped up a little bit and had better line mates, but tougher assignments as well. And I'm seeing things that I like out of the player. I don't know. I don't know that he's got the potential to really be a great player, but I think he could be a good player for a good long time. And I mean, they got to give some of these young guys a shot at some point. They're giving him one, and I don't think he's failing. I just think he's up and down. He has good games. He has so-so games. But by and large, I see him as part of the solution in the longer term, which is probably more than I'm going to say about most of the guys that we're discussing.
I think he could well be like we agree fundamentally on the player. Like he's a player with a lot of potential, and to see him struggle is not unexpected. I think like my comment on Ryan and McLeod are both related to the same issue. They didn't bring in a third line center. They counted on these guys. It was asking too much probably. They expended capital on the next guy on our list, Devon Shore. They gave him a contract, which again, but with Shore, let's just move on to him. I'm going to give him the thumbs down because there was very little bet on the contract. They can send him to the minors. It's nothing. There's no harm to the Oilers doing that. Sending
Right.
Devon Shore to the minors, he earns less than the NHL minimum. He's got a 2-year deal as well at $850,000. At the time of the signing, I liked it because I was thinking of Shore along the line of Josh Archibald, who really improved in his second year at the Oilers under Tippett, and I thought the same might happen with Shore. Fast, hits a bit, has some skill, can maybe figure out his role. Instead, he's regressed as a player and hasn't, even as a fourth line player, hasn't helped the Oilers. He's the weakest defensive forward on the Oilers. He's not providing much on the attack. So they needed a third line center, Bruce, heading into this season. And the bets that Ken Holland make did not pan out. So overall, at the center position, I'm going to give Holland a thumbs down, with Shore a thumbs down.
Okay. Yeah, we're in full agreement on that. And I was frankly a little surprised and wrote at the time about that he was the first player to be re-signed off of last year. And I get that the coach likes him. I honestly wonder why at times, because I don't see a particularly good defensive or offensive player. Every once in a while, he comes up with a play. I mean, they all do. These are, but uh, again, turning to puck IQ, that says that of all of the fellows listed as center, um, Shore faces he, he he faces the most bottom line opponents. He faces 3 times as much of his time against bottom line opponents as elite opponents, with the rest somewhere in the middle. And yet he has the worst shot shares, the worst danger Fenwick, which is their attempt at shot quality. So when you're at the bottom left of this graph that shows quality of competition and on ice results, that's the worst place to be. And it's not that big of a surprise because he was there last year. And he was, the Oilers were getting less than 40% of the shots when this guy was on the ice. Less than 40%. You can't even expect to saw off when that's happening.
In the one thing in his defense, he's been injured, I think, twice, and he's had COVID. So there's been, in terms of like
Yeah.
expecting someone to really raise the level of their game, it could still happen. He could surprise us if he gets healthy, and he could trend up. Tippett again with Josh Archibald. I thought Josh Archibald was just kind of okayish in his first year, but I think he got a lot better last year. And Shore could do the same if he gets healthy and stays healthy. So, fingers crossed on that. Bruce, let's move on to the wings. We're going to talk about Hyman, Benson, Fogle, Sevier, Perlini. Okay, and I'll start off with Zach Hyman. That's a strong 2 thumbs up. Two
Okay.
thumbs up for Zach Hyman. I just think he's been really strong. top 6 NHL winger. The length of his contract is concerning, but what they're getting this year for the amount of money that they're paying him, they're getting full value on that contract this year. He's strong defensively. He's great on the forecheck, puck protecting. He's a smart player who works well with Connor McDavid. I think we haven't seen him with Draisaitl, interesting, which might be a fascinating combination because you get those two guys puck protecting together. That could be like a total nightmare for the opposition team. Two great big guys who are right near the top of the NHL when it comes to puck protection skills in the offensive end. They could create a lot of zone time together. So he's been set back by injury, as is often the case with Hyman. This has been an ongoing thing. With him, the way he plays the game, he's going to get banged up. He's going to get hurt. But he came back. He was healthy again against Ottawa. I thought he was really played a really strong game. And I like the signing. I like the player.
I like the player. I'm less enthused with his results to this point. Like he had a strong start, and he really struggled mightily in December, both before he got hurt and after he came back from being hurt. He missed the same 3 games Dave Tippett did. So of the 14 games that were under review here, he played 11 of them, and the Oilers lost all 11 of those games. With Zach Hyman scoring 0 goals, 4 assists, and I think a -9 in that time. And I'm just, he's a good player, but they're paying him to be a good player. Like I don't see that's a huge payback on value over cap hit. We talked about this a little bit on Saturday night. I mean, Toronto got him as a $2.25 million player, and he was fantastic value in Toronto. And he was also a double-digit plus player every year in Toronto. And here in Edmonton, he's making, he got a significant raise on the order of 140% or something. And I'm glad he's on the team, and I think he will turn it around. But up to this point, the results are fairly middling. And just to expand a little bit, in Toronto, they had a player that he was good with skilled players, and he played a lot with Matthews and Marner over the years, which explains some of his results, of course. But they also used him not just on left wing, but they used him on right wing. At times, they would shift him down onto the bottom 6. And when he was in the bottom 6, he'd be the best player on his line, and he would drive a line. I mean, we saw 3 games in Edmonton last year where Toronto came in, and that darn line of Engvall, Mcleod, and Hyman was the best line in the whole 3-game series. And we haven't seen Dave Tippett try that even once with all the problems that he has on the bottom 6. He's never once said, okay, Zach, we're going to try you to drive the third line, see if we can get the team going down there. But it's like they're just fixated on, let's put the same 5 or 6 players in the top 6 all the time. And even if they're losing, let's keep on doing what we've been doing. And so that's not so much on Zach Hyman because it's a capability that he has. I think it's on the coaching and or the management vision of how they can use this player. He's a more wide-ranging player who can help the team in more ways than they've accessed to this point.
All right, Tyler Benson, Bruce. I'm going to give Tyler Benson a thumbs up. I don't think the coach loves this player.
No.
He's only got 1 assist in 17 games, and he's -4. So those numbers are really underwhelming. By our grade A shots, he's doing pretty well, though. He's creating a okay number of them, and he's giving up very little on defense. He's been a fairly strong defensive hockey player. So he's gotten really limited opportunities. The coach doesn't put him with quality line mates hardly ever. He's hardly had a sniff in the top 6. Like if you're talking about moving Hyman down, You could have moved Benson up for a game or two.
Yes.
See how that goes with McDavid or Draisaitl. This would have been an obvious move. I think the coaches failed the player in terms of giving him a little bit more opportunity. I think he's earned it now and then, and consistently hasn't received it. But when he's been on the ice, the results have been okay. You can see the skating is a weakness. He's not a fast player, but he's making up for that with some hitting and gritty play, which you think might get the eye of the coaching staff a little bit more, because he's willing to go out there and play a gritty game. How many Oiler forwards do that? I mean, have we seen that from Derek Ryan or Ryan McLeod or even Devon Shore? We haven't. 3 guys who kind of, essentially float around. I hate to put it that way so bluntly, but that's I think a fair comment. Benson is getting his nose in there, and so is Hyman. This is why I like these players, and working hard on the boards. And I'd like to see him get a little bit more of a opportunity. You could see him fading away quickly here if he doesn't get that shot.
Well, you're certainly bang on the line mates, David. Here's his line mates that he's played the most with this year. Derek Ryan, 41 minutes. Devon Shore, 36 minutes. Ryan McLeod, 24 minutes. Zach Cassian, 19 minutes. And then we go down. I might have missed one. Kyler Yamamoto, 8 minutes. Like he's playing almost strictly with, Colton Sevier. I missed the top guys. Colton Sevier, 74 minutes. Kyle Turris, 57 minutes.
Yeah, I thought they were.
Then Derek Ryan. I had to page scroll down on the top.
Yeah.
So
2 veterans, Turris and Sevier, have very little to give at this point. On the offense, I mean.
Well, he's played 74 minutes with Colton Sevier, and the Oilers have scored 0 goals in that time. Maybe time to try him with someone else?
Yeah, they're kind of similar players in some ways. So, yeah. So would you give him a thumbs up or a thumbs down, Bruce?
I'm going to give him a sideways thumb, and it's up
you
from
gotta
the
pick.
Ryan
You gotta
McLeod
pick.
from the Ryan McLeod sense. I'm seeing good things, but I'm not seeing results. So if I guess I'm results driven, so I'm going to say reluctantly thumbs down, even as I do see potentially him being part of the solution as we go forward. If the coach, either this one or the next one, gives him a decent chance.
I think I'm process driven, so I'm
Yep.
going to give him the thumbs up. I like the process. I like what I'm seeing.
That's fair.
Warren Fogle. I'm going to give Warren Fogle. This is a tough one.
Yep.
Okay, I'm going to give him a thumbs down at this point. And it's close. This is a close one. But the process has been okay. He's hanging in there. He's kind of hanging in there as a third line winger. Creating. Yeah, I'd like to see him create a bit more and give up a bit less in his own zone. I love the physicality of the player. I love his hustle, and I think the Oilers really need a big body player like this on the wing. More guys like them. So that's what I like about him. But he's got 5 goals in 35 games. He's -10. So the Oilers are getting outscored when he's out there. He's part of a problem in that regard, and he actually has been part of that problem. Like he's not been great defensively. The acquisition cost was Ethan Bear. Bear, I'm not following his season in Carolina, so his time on ice indicates he's being used as a bottom pairing defenseman in Carolina, I believe. So the acquisition cost, I guess, is some people are really enamored with Bear. I like Bear, but I wasn't as enamored as some with Ethan Bear's game. So, but the Oilers gave up a decent player. I think they got a decent player with potential. So I think the trade in that regard is kind of a saw-off, but Fogel's results, and for what he's being paid, it's $2.5 million, isn't it? Over 3, 2.7, 2.75 million over 3 years. So this is my main reason for the negative mark. Mm-hmm. They're not getting enough from a player that they invested a fairly big size contract in. He's got to score more. He's got to defend better. The results have got to be better. He's in the prime of his career. He's 25 years old. It's time to perform. And we're seeing that now and then, but not enough.
Well, that's a somewhat similar point that I made with respect to Zach Hyman when you talk about his production versus his salary. Fogle, 5 goals, 7 assists, -8 at 2.8 million. Hyman, 11 goals, 9 assists, -9 at 5.5 million. I mean, in both cases, a little bit underwhelming with the production. In the case of Fogle, I do like the big body physicality that you talk about. I wish he'd hit more, frankly. I mean, he does barge around out there and he uses his body to advantage, but I do wish he'd hit more because honestly, just because I think the Oilers need it, you know.
Yeah, ain't that the
And
truth, Bruce?
yeah, they haven't got enough physicality up front, and so. And in fairness to Warren Fogle, he ain't playing with Jordan Stahl as the center anymore, right? Which he was in Carolina, playing with higher quality line mates than he's been getting on the bottom six in Edmonton. So uh, again, I'm somewhere in the middle, and I think I'm going to say thumbs down, but I do see him as part of the longer term solution. I think he's starting to fit in. I thought he did well in the sort of brief chance that he got in the top six.
Yeah, I like him better than Cassian up there. I think he does more than Cassian does. Okay, Colton Sevier, Bruce. I'm going to give Colton Sevier a thumbs up. Again, he's he's a very cheap signing. You can send him to the minors. There's no downside, and he only earned $750,000 a year, so he's actually helps you with the cap because he's below the league minimum there, and he's at the league minimum or close to it. I don't know exactly what the league
That is
minimum.
the league.
That's the
It
league
is
minimum.
750.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, same with so him and Perlini and Benson are all at league minimum. And he's been a decent kind of fill-in player on the bottom line.
Mhm.
He's been playing higher up the lineup and he's been playing a more prominent role in the penalty kill. He's been struggling on the penalty kill as of late.
Yep.
So he's part of the problem. Part of the problem there. They're using him a little bit too much, I think, at this point. They're counting on him a little bit too much because he gave quite a bit, but he's a really smart hockey player. He's pretty gritty. Like he's not a big hitter, but he hits now and then. He'll get into the guts of the game, as they say. Like he will jostle with opposing players. He's a smart defensive hockey player. He's a decent fourth line hockey player. So I don't have a problem with that signing at all. I think it's a definite win for the Oilers. Just wish he was 2 inches bigger and hit a little bit more, because that's really that's the winger that they're missing on the bottom lines, and they're missing obviously a third line center who can really play.
Yeah. Well, he's a jack of all trades, and for where they got him, PTO. He came in and as has happened with many PTOs in recent years in Edmonton, he played well enough in camp to earn a contract because the depth of the team wasn't so strong that there wasn't, there was still room. And as a 13-14 forward, 12-13-14 forward, that's a solid addition. Fact is, he's played. Geez, I bet you he's played every game for the last 20 now. I haven't
Yeah,
looked at his exact streak, but he's been an every night player in the lineup because he's been outperforming other guys in the bottom six. So I will give him a thumbs up for what he is, limited, a limited jack of all player. He's like a good utility infielder, because he does play multiple positions. He can play center even, and he's done so in a pinch on more than one occasion when the Oilers were down and at the pivot position. And he does, you get his best every night. Like there's uh, uh, I have no concerns whatsoever with his commitment and effort level and all those sort of intangible things that some people hate but are part of the game. Um, And every once in a while he creates scoring chances, but his ability to finish them is a little underwhelming. 5 points in 26 games. So that's about a 15 point a year player for 10 minutes a night, playing, not with great line mates and often in a defensive role. It's it's not nothing. So every once in a while it'll chip in with a goal or a point. But so overall, thumbs up on the sort of last minute addition.
Brendan Perlini, Bruce, I'm going to give a thumbs down to. Scored a nice goal against Ottawa, but I just think
Promptly got
this
benched.
speaks to a um, they just misjudged their team a little bit. Maybe they were expecting Josh Archibald to come back. I don't know, but the absence of Archibald is felt on this lineup because he hit. He was a big hitter. He was a physical player, and they're missing that guy. Chason was a gritty player, big guy who kind of like a bigger version of Colton Sevier, who his specialty was the power play, whereas Sevier's on the penalty kill. But they just misjudged what they needed on these bottom lines because they have between Turris and Perlini, they have two very players who don't play a physical style of play. And to give Perlini credit, I've noticed in the recent games he's trying to hit more. So that's what he would have to do to stick in the NHL. But we're not seeing enough of that. And between him and Turris, that's just two spots in the lineup. Like, why are they on this team? Why are they still, what role do they play?
Mm-hmm.
What are they giving the Oilers? And it's just a mystery to me in terms of lineup construction, especially with Tippett, supposedly the expert in finding these kind of role players to fill roles. What is their role? They're not checkers. They're not scorers. They don't hit. They don't add anything to the special teams. What do they do? I mean, Turris has scored a couple shootout goals, but that can be as much luck as anything. I mean, obviously it takes skill to score a shootout goal, so I'll give him credit. That he has done that, Turris, but this is a big mistake that they've made in their lineup roster construction. And Holland's ultimately responsible for it. So when it comes to the wingers, I'm going to give him a thumbs down there as well, I guess. Hyman, I like that signing. I like how he's played. I'm good with that. Benson, I think I put that more on the coach. But the other moves, I'm not. He didn't bring to this team what they needed on the wing, especially those bottom line positions. They're missing a couple role players, and that shouldn't be. I guess the only excuse you give him is the Josh Archibald out, that he maybe wasn't expecting that, but you got to be on top of that as well.
Yeah, well, Sevier, I guess he was more than, if you say he replaced any one player, it was Josh Archibald in that.
Yeah,
He was a late signing after the late issues that arose with Arch, and uh, he's Archibald without the speed or the ferocity, but he does bring other elements to the table. Uh, as for Perlini, big thumbs down to the Perlini that eventually got sent down to the minors after 13 appearances in which he had no goals, no assists, and in fact his team had scored no goals and all the time he was on the ice. He was just a complete non-factor. He barely had, I think he had 6 shots on net, no more than one in any game. And then he went down to Bakersfield, put a couple in the net down there, and the Oilers ran into COVID issues and they had to call him back up. And he's been better. Like he had 7 shots in his first game back, and now he scored 3 goals and an assist in the last 5 games that he's played. And so at least we're seeing that, that one plus ability that he does have, which is his shot. And he's getting them off and he's beaten a couple of goalies with it. But still, overall, I'll say thumbs down in terms of not really bringing, um, as you say, what the team has needed in a depth role. He's had 23 hits, David. He had 3 games with 4 each, and all the other games combined, he had 11 hits. And so 12 in 3 games, 11 in the other 18 games. He brings it some nights, and other nights he's pretty close to invisible.
Yeah, and sometimes he only gets 6-7 minutes of ice
Oh,
time, so there's that as well. It's hard to get hits when that's
oh,
the case. So, but yeah, I just don't see that is his that's good that he's come back and he's scoring more. Obviously, the Oilers need depth scoring. If he can provide that in kind of a third line role, like as a that's the idea of a third line winger, I guess. But overall, it's not work. They just need a different mix of players, and sticking. I just don't get the sticking with Turris. What's going on there? Like Bruce, I don't see in NHL hockey. Like, what does he add? Perley needs scoring, so he's adding a little bit more in that regard, and he has potential to hit more. So we'll see. All right, defense, Bruce. We're going to talk about Cody Ceci,
mhm.
Duncan Keith, um, Marcus Niemelainen, and I don't, Bouchard's kind of I don't think he's really fits because this is all expected with him. So we'll talk about those guys. I'll start off with Cody Ceci, Bruce. I'm going to give him a really strong 2 thumbs up. I think he's been a very solid top 4 defenseman. He's for a top 4 defenseman in the NHL, he's on a 4-year contract at $3.25 million. I was very fearful this wouldn't work out and we'd have a player who couldn't get by in the top 4. He's worked his way up to the top pairing in the last game, and I think we'll see, because we've seen a succession of defensemen on right D move up to partner with Nurse and then have their games crater. Happened to Tyson Barrie, happened to Evan Bouchard. Bouchard and Barrie get moved down the lineup and they tend to do better, notwithstanding Bouchard's last game. But they tend to play better when they're in the lesser role, and then they get moved up with Nurse and it doesn't go well. Well, we'll see how it goes with Ceci. I've got a better feeling about this. I think there's a solid chance that this veteran player is going to come through in the top pairing, paired with Nurse. He's pretty good he's pretty good at everything. I find pretty good defensive fundamentally. He's okay physically, like as a physical player. He'll get in there a little bit. His defensive fundamentals are pretty good. His penalty killing's okay. So he's a kind of okay to pretty good in all these different categories. And I've been and his game before he got here was marked by major gaffes, met reads that he got wrong. And we're not seeing that, Bruce, hardly at all. He's very unlikely to get caught on a bad pinch or out of position wandering in the defensive zone. He's figured out the defensive game at the NHL, at the highest end of the NHL level, top 4D, and he's getting by there. He's always been, I think, a fairly solid puck mover. So I like him.
I like much about him, and I think he's at the price point they got him. He's a 4-5, where he's either in the top 4 or he's leading leading the third pairing, and the price point isn't bad for a player in that position. Lots of teams have five defensemen in the $3+ million range, and he's kind of a jack of all trades. Like he doesn't really stand out as a great defensive player. He doesn't really stand out as a great offensive player, but he does a lot of things kind of okay. And he's been relatively solid. His results haven't been like super great. Like he's got 1 goal, 9 points, -6 through 31 games. I think he missed 4 with his when he was the first guy with COVID, and the team certainly missed him when he went down. Like that was the beginning of they won the first game he missed, where they kind of miraculously beat Pittsburgh, and then since then it's just been a steady downhill stumble for the team as a whole. But Ceci was the first guy to miss time that sort of clearly impacted the team's performance at that point. So I'm not as strong a 2 thumbs up as you, but I will give him a single thumb up.
All right, Duncan Keith. So, Bruce, I just wrote a post about Duncan Keith.
Saw that.
And the headline is Edmonton Oilers are down, but one key veteran D-man is finally trending up. So in his first 20 games with the Oilers, if people were scratching their heads about this player, the acquisition cost, which was high, Caleb Jones, mainly Keith's salary, 2 years at what is it, 5.5 million per year. That's the main issue. And also then either a second or third pick, depending on how the Oilers do in the playoffs. So if people were
Playoffs.
upset about the Duncan Keith acquisition, fair comment. They had every
Mm-hmm.
right to be.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, in the last 6 games, though, Bruce, he's really starting to play well. He is moving the puck exceptionally well. He sent against New Jersey. He sent McDavid in on a breakaway. Against Ottawa, he found Cutter Yamamoto for with a cross-ice dart for a great shot by Yamamoto, and then he walked the line and pushed the puck into Perlini for a goal. He's consistently been making very good passes. His defensive play has improved considerably. He's still not. He's still just okay in a top four role in the last 6 games, but he was bad in the first 20. And I don't know what to make of this, honestly.
Yeah.
Are we going to see this really good Duncan Keith, the rest of the year? If we do, and he carries it on into the playoffs, which I think the Oilers, I'm still in the Oilers will make the playoffs camp, and he helps the Oilers in the playoffs, then I think people might change their minds. It's fair not to change your mind until then.
Yeah.
So he cost so much, though. Holland needed to either shave down the salary cap hit with Chicago or get the draft pick dropped. Ken Holland got taken on the deal. And the only way that changes is if Duncan Keith comes through for the Oilers in the playoffs this year and is a solid top four D-man for the Edmonton Oilers in the playoffs. So in that way, I think it's too early to judge. It wouldn't be too early to judge if we hadn't seen this last 6 games, which gives us a vision maybe of what Keith can be if he's really playing well. So at this point, all things considered, I'm going to have to give this a thumbs down at this point. But I think there's like I was saying in my post, before this, there was like a 20%, at the most, a 20% chance this bet was going to pay off for Holland based on his first 20 games. It was probably more like 10% realistically. Now I'm going to say it's almost 50-50, like a 40% chance this bet's going to pay off for Ken Holland because Duncan Keith has had a really remarkable stretch of games. It's just 6 games. So let's see if it continues another 10, 15, 20, then I'm going to be a lot happier. And boy, do the Oilers ever need this play from Duncan Keith because he was part of the problem sinking this team during the slump. Now looks like he could be part of the solution.
Yeah, the trouble is that those 6 games were all losses. I mean, he's so against the flow of his team, and he has been good these last games. He's looked very solid to my eye. It's his defense is improved. I won't say he's a great defensive player, but he's his passing and breakout passing and offensive zone play has been good in those games. I guess the question is here: are we judging Duncan Keith, or is the overview we're judging Ken Holland's work in bringing in Duncan Keith? Because for Duncan Keith himself, I'm basically where you are, where my thumb is down from his early performance, but it's wavering and starting to come around in terms of recent performance, but it still only represents sort of a quarter to a third of his season to date. In terms of the acquisition by Holland, I'm giving that a big thumbs down. I thought, as you do, that he got worked in that deal. That not only should the Oilers not have thrown in a draft choice, if they were taking that whole contract, they should have gotten stuff from Chicago, right? I mean, there was other trades going on. I mean, Arizona got Shane Goss to spare, and they got a couple of draft picks just to take his contract. They didn't have to give up a bunch of stuff to get a guy that the other team was looking to move on from. And Chicago and Keith, I mean, he basically asked for the trade and had come to a parting of the ways. And I thought Holland had a whole lot of leverage there and used none of it. And it was I'm still baffled by that sequence of events and his snappy answer to Daniel Nugent-Bowman. What do you expect me to get him for nothing? Was a tell that cap space, which to me is the biggest asset you got in this league, is cap space. And he didn't consider that as being an asset that he'd given up for Keith, that somehow he still had to pay to get this guy, that he was also going to be given the full bore cap hit that Keith was earning all the years that he was in Chicago and getting, Norris trophies and championships and so on. The Oilers are still paying the full ticket of what he was getting through all those years. Now, sort of 6 years since he was near his peak. And it's still a transaction that left me and leaves me questioning Oilers management.
Yeah, it's kind of an old school. It seemed almost like an old school way of looking at the NHL where cap space isn't properly valued.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he wanted his gray beard, which is fine, And again, if Keith keeps playing like this, if he can keep up this high level of play, this could still work out. He could be like he's played like a $5.5 million defenseman these last 6 games. That's how they play. They're really good hockey players. That's what Keith has been. But man, that's too short of a window to make any judgments on it and to hope that it's going to, to be confident that it's going to last. You can't be. He could. His defensively, he just strikes me. I know Jim Playfair was saying on Ryan Whitney's podcast, Spittin' Chicklets, that he, like below the dots, Keith is still as fast as anyone. I just don't see it. I see a player who has lost a little bit down there. He's really smart with the puck and excellent with the puck, but I think he's lost a step. And you can see it in the defensive end where he's often just a little bit trailing the play. And even in this really good spell of play, his defense has not been exemplary. It's been okay. So this is an ongoing issue that he's got to figure out, Duncan Keith, how to become how to shut down top attackers a little bit better, even with his diminished capacity to do so.
Yeah, and puck retrieval is where I've noticed a step that, mind you, the most I saw of Keith in Chicago was during the first 6 years of that 13-year contract. And of course, as the team became less competitive, they were, you didn't see him on TV in May and June quite so much those last few years, but he always struck me as being a fantastic player on puck retrievals, that you couldn't get the puck deep on him and win a race to it. And that's something of an issue at this late stage in his career.
Bit more of a saw off now in terms of who's going to get it and win it and keep it. When he gets there first, he's so clever with the puck. He can, even if they're on him, he can still make a really good play. But he's not always there first. All right, Bruce. The last player we'll deal with is Markus Niemelainen, who's played 90 even strength minutes. I don't think he's been. I think he's been okay. He's not a great passer of the puck. He can be exposed on defense on the rush, but I think he stands out because there is a glaring weakness on this team in terms of physical play. There's just not enough players who just game in, game out, give the opposition hell, just give them hell in terms of getting after them, hitting them, being on them. And Niemelainen, he's a big hitter and the kind of Andy Sutton mold, great big guy who can just flat out crumple opposing forwards. And he's for that reason, I could still see him. He was sent down to the minors, but I could still see him getting a call up and getting some playing time here because he does fill that need on the Oilers. And so in terms of, he was a draft pick. He's, it's not paid a lot, minimum contract. I'm going to give him a thumbs up because for someone who's not much was expected about a year ago or 2 years ago, he looks like he could possibly be an NHL bottom pairing defenseman who provides physical play for the Edmonton Oilers.
Hard to disagree with any of that. I mean, really, on the organizational depth chart, where is he? About number 10? But
Yeah.
they had to call him up because they had such a tire fire on the defense where they lost Nurse, Keith, Cece, uh, Kukuk all at the same time, and so they had to go deep into their farm system. And I think his results, like his goal share, 1-4-3 against his um, his on ice results are pretty mediocre. But he did bring that element of physicality, which the team has been lacking. And I mean, how big of a price are you prepared to pay for that in terms of flow of play? I don't know, but I do think, for a guy playing literally his first, would you say 7 NHL games, and he, uh, I think he passed the test, and that he didn't, they'll give him another look at some point.
It's funny, they need kind of a Niemelainen type player on the wing,
Yeah.
is what they need. And they don't have that in the organization. There's no one on the farm who is that player, and that I know of. I mean, there's Luke Esposito, but he's not even on an NHL contract, and he's not. I don't think the speed is there to play at the NHL game. I mean, that guy just is a killer in terms of physical play and effort. So they need that kind of player at the NHL level. Finding that player, not going to be easy. I think lots of NHL teams want that guy who can really hit and get in there and play some hockey. But the Oilers are going to be hard pressed to fill that third 3C. Even the grinding winger thing, it's going to be hard. I think they have one trade to make. I think it's going to be for a goalie. And at this point, because you can't count on the guys they have. So, but other than that, I think this is the team that Ken Holland says the answers are going to have to come from within. Well, they really are, because the Oilers' options are limited, and the one option they have, trading their first pick for a goalie, is not ideal. It's not ideal, but maybe Dylan Holloway will come up and be that beast. That fast physical player. Can't count him at 3C, but count on him to be the fast physical winger. There's a possibility, right? Like Martin Jelena in circa
Mhm.
1990.
Yeah.
Uh,
There you go.
maybe that's what we'll see from Dylan Holloway, which would be fantastic, obviously. But
So one more. I mean, if we're talking about Marcus Niemelainen, who got a 7-game trial and then got sent back down. Well, Philip Broberry had a similar uh, uh, baptism by fire. He got called up for 8 games that he played, and eventually got farmed back out. But so they're kind of in the same category. Interested in your take on what we saw from Philip Broberry in the NHL.
uh, he got played over his head, and then he looked it. In the end, he started to leak grade A chances against. I really liked his pairing with Cody Ceci. I thought, that was in a top 4 role, but it wasn't. I don't think it was the top pairing at that point. I think Keith was with someone else in the top pairing, and I really liked them. I thought, big, fast guy, can move the puck, moves the puck well, has some defensive issues, mainly based on he's 20 years old. He's a rookie in
Yeah.
North America. They asked too much of him in the end. He started to play more than 20 minutes a game. But if Philip Broberry had been brought in in a third pairing role this year, that might have worked out just fine. But I like him where he's at in the AHL. He's where he belongs. I think he's a really solid defensive prospect. I see him being a top 4 left side defenseman in the NHL for a long time. He's 6'3", 6'4". He can really skate. He is probably the best skater on the blue line, and that's saying a lot because Darnell Nurse is a pretty good skater. So I like them, Bruce.
Yeah.
Thumbs up.
Well, yeah, he's he's ahead of the Oscar Klefbom curve, and that's been a good comparable for Broberry since they drafted him. They both spent 2 years in Sweden, came over to the AHL. Klefbom never got called up in his first pro season until after the trade deadline, and he played the rest of the way. And even in his season after that, he spent time in the AHL early in the season before emerging as a permanent NHLer. Broberry got, because of the circumstances with all those injuries, illnesses, and so on. He got that call early, and I agree it was before he was ready. And I mean, there's certainly signs of promise. He had, Oilers had over 52% of the shot attempts when he was on the ice, 116 minutes, but 18% of the goals. Like they got outscored 9-2. And, I think he was a minus player 7 or 8 games in a row. And then, he had a very good first game. And then after that, and some of those games he didn't play bad, but something went wrong and the puck wound up in the net. Or the goalie didn't make the save, or you know how it is with this team. And anyway, so to me, that was good experience for him, and it will help him the next time he comes up. And so, obviously, overall, I see him as a long-term help to what ails this franchise. So I'll give him a tentative thumbs up for at least getting that first test under his belt and going down, and what he's done since he went back down. He's really looked good down there. So I think he's benefited from that experience.
Some interesting lines just came out, Bruce, for the Oilers
Yeah.
in practice today. You were complaining about Brendan Perlini getting benched after the goal.
Yeah, he played
Perlini,
5 minutes.
McDavid, and Yamamoto.
Okay.
Perlini, McDavid, and Yamamoto. Second line, I was just mentioning how I'd like to see Draisaitl and Hyman together. How's this for a big check-in line? Hyman, Draisaitl, and Puljujarvi. And why haven't we seen that line before this year? Seriously. Just makes so much sense, right? Okay, Foegele, McLeod, and Cassian. Yikes. And
they played a lot together.
Shore, Ryan, and Sevier.
Tyler Benson, odd man out.
Well, he might still have COVID. Do we know if he's on the some?
He was cleared and he practiced on Saturday morning,
he
but
did.
he was, but they had to choose just they had to add one more player who came off of the COVID list, and they chose Foegele, which was seemed like a slam dunk, but I guess he's still anyway. Whatever.
On defense.
Mm-hmm.
Nurse and Cece.
Yep.
Keith Barry.
Yep.
Russell Bouchard. I like those pairings. I like that's about as good as you're going to get right now, especially if Keith and Barry, who have been trending up, can continue to trend up.
Mm-hmm.
Nurse and Cece should be really solid. Mm-hmm. And Evan Bouchard's had struggles on defense, but he's with the right guy to cover that up, is Chris Russell, if Russell's healthy and good to go. So, and Koskinen's in the starters net.
We talked about the penalty kill earlier. I would submit that the penalty kill unit has missed Chris Russell.
Fair enough.
And they've also missed Ryan Nugent-Hopkins for this last smaller stretch of games. But I don't think Russell's played pretty much at any time throughout this streak. Maybe at the very beginning of it, a couple of the losses, and then he got banged up. And then I think the PK has suffered in his absence.
Ryan Whitney of Spittin' Chicklets podcast says, quote, just sitting here waiting for the Edmonton Oilers to do something, fire the coach or make a trade, but for God's sake, do something. End quote. Very, very popular tweet.
I can
very
imagine.
popular.
Mm-hmm.
So, I guess these lineup changes are pretty dramatic. So there's doing something. Like, I kind of like it. I mean, I don't think Perlini, McDavid, and Yamamoto. I don't know. Is Perlini going to step up here? I'd rather see Foegele, honestly. Foegele, McDavid, and Yamamoto. But the Oilers they're short a winger. And
they're short a sniper. And Perlini, if you put him on the line with McLeod and Cassian, how much sniping opportunities is he going to get? You might as well see if he's going to snipe or not by putting him up in the top six. Fair and enough. Find out what you got. You know what the definition of insanity is, and we've been going back there for this long slide. And so try something different. Might not be the first thing that pops into our head, but what we can agree on is it's different. And why not? Perlini scored a goal in each of his last 2 games. Maybe he's finding that mojo he had in training camp, and I don't necessarily expect it will last for long, but they might as well give him a chance to skate with it. So we'll see how he responds to a chance with the superstar.
We'll see. BJ McDonald was not a great hockey player at the NHL level, but he put up points with Wayne Gretzky for a while there. So
Mhm.
maybe Perlini can get on a streak where he'll score, at even strength with Connor McDavid. And I agree. You persuaded me, Bruce. Your argument. It's certainly worth a try. And I really love the Hyman Draisaitl Puljujärvi line. I mean, I love that line. I think that's a really inspired choice because you send that group out there. If they can get in the offensive end, they could have that puck. They could just be that could be a nightmare for the opposition. Those three players together, their skills could really combine well. So I like that a ton. I really like it. It reminds me of when Puljujärvi first broke in and they played Draisaitl, Puljujärvi, and Patrick Maroon in Puljujärvi's about first 10 games. And I thought, oh, wow, Puljujärvi looks great, this rookie. Like, he's really fitting in here. This line's keeping it in the offensive end a lot. And so we could have the same dynamic here. All right, let's leave it
Yeah,
there, Bruce.
yeah. We talked about Hyman and Draisaitl, and they've both been in the top six all year, but they've been the two that have switched out. Anytime that Leon has moved up, it's always been Hyman that's moved down. I'm just going to do a quick check to see how many minutes they've actually played together outside of the power play, and it's not going to be
No, not much.
be
They would
very
have spent
many.
some time together with an empty net when there's been
17 minutes all year.
yeah.
So, whereas, Leon's played 286 minutes with Connor, 243 with Puljujärvi, 120 with Yamamoto. Oh, sorry, this is Hyman. Has played, but
Yeah.
barely under 20 minutes with Leon. Let's give it a shot. You got three very skilled players there on that line. Maybe they'll click. You might as well find out what you got and look for some new chemistry because old chemistry ain't working.
Let's leave it there, Bruce. Thanks for talking today.
Hey, thanks for listening, everyone.
And in the meantime, and in between times, this has been another edition of the Cult of Hockey podcast.